And good. And we are live. Welcome to the Uncommon Sense Podcast. I am your host, Blake. And today I have a special guest, my friend Catlin Gilbert, resident American, coming over here in Canada, living, loving, and being a little bit safer than I guess it is over there right now. And is it producer or...
I'm currently a production manager at the Effect Studio. Yeah.
Production manager at Disney, working for the mouse.
Technically, MPC, so motion picture company, or moving picture company rather, based out of London. So, but we have offices here in Montreal. We do work with clients like Disney, but there's many others.
Okay, motion picture company, very cool. So how you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. How are you, Blake?
Things are things, and COVID is
things.
COVID, and everything's shut down, and can't work and can't do what you want to do, but you got to do other things. So hey,
exactly, here we are. That's why we're chatting.
That's all that can happen, really much. But yeah, so crazy time to be an American. I mean, my dad's American. I've got family who are all American. I've got friends who, obviously, a bunch of friends who live in the States and everything, and I find myself constantly sending messages back and forth over, social media, like, "Hey, are you guys okay? Do you need anything?
Yeah.
Do you need me to sponsor you to come to Canada because you're afraid the country's going to burn down? Like how, are you guys sure you're all right?" But it's crazy time to be affiliated with America, be an American.
Or sitting, less than 50 kilometers away from the border, right?
So. Yeah, and just, being just on the other side and having to, I guess this is like when you watch an empire burn from the outside, like when you're those small villagers who watch a castle burn down, like this is.
That's exactly it. And it's heart-wrenching. It's just heart-wrenching. I came to Canada mostly for school. I was 17, but I won't say it wasn't because of politically driven motives. At the time it was George Bush who was president, and I wanted to get the hell out of there.
I thought George Bush was
yeah, that's it. I'm looking back at it now, and if I'm looking at him now, and I was like, "Oh, that war criminal isn't so bad. Look at him painting cute little, dog paintings. Things are pretty effed up, right?" So it's watching a three-ring circus. It's watching the empire burn, and it's really heartbreaking. And I know for a lot of people around the world, it's not. For years and years of American neo-imperialism and neo-colonialism and all their reaches around the world, it's kind of like the comeuppance. I hate to say it, right? But that doesn't change, the lives of the people in America who are suffering, right? And there are millions of them. We're talking about people of color. We're talking about minorities. We're talking about, LGBT, trans, just the majority of Americans are suffering. So it's really, really hard to watch.
It's a bit of a, I don't know, it's one thing, like, I think everybody to a certain extent wants change, for positive reasons, and they want things to change, for the good. But I don't think anybody wants to see change come about in a way that would cause such a hostile environment, and would, but I think it's one of those things where the old heads just stayed in power for so long and just grasped onto power for so long that the only way that they're actually going to get pushed out is through means where, like, you're either going to change or you're going to go down with your sinking ship.
Exactly that. And I think the Republicans knew that a while ago, which is why we've had these fringe Republican candidates for so long. So you've had your Michelle Bachmans and your Sarah Palins, but they always kind of paired them up with somebody who's reasonable, right? Mm-hmm. So, you have Sarah Palin and the senator there, completely blanking, Arizona, John McCain. And
I didn't actually mind John McCain. Like, if there was going to be a conservative president, I was like, okay, well, I mean, he's been to war. He's pretty stable. He works with both sides of the, he works on both sides of the argument.
And in terms of social issues, he was pretty liberal, all things considered. Not entirely, but pretty liberal out there. But that's the thing. So the Republican Party had at one point, like, pairing these moderate candidates. Even Mitt Romney, technically, he made universal health care in Massachusetts, right? and
But
then
what's really
opposed it.
weird because Mitt Romney technically wasn't even an American. Mitt Romney was born in Mexico.
There you go.
Which was like, I only learned this a couple months ago, but like
Okay.
supposedly like his family has a huge, because he's Mormon. So
Yeah.
supposedly there was a huge migration of Mormons into Mexico once their lifestyle was kind of like illegalized like in America. But I don't remember if he is born in Mexico or if he's like Mexican nationality, but yeah, that was the weird thing I learned. And I'm like, it's weird that he was almost president of the United States at one point.
Interesting. There must have been a naturalization there. Perhaps his family had American citizenship, which would
something, or they moved down there and then came. I don't know, something, but it was just weird because they were giving Brock so much crap about being,
the birther movement.
The birthing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was like, but your guy is literally like not here. Like he's white, but you know what I mean? He's literally living in another country because his way of life is not supported, which is also weird too. Yeah. Because one of the standpoints, in on that side of on the red side of the argument is kind of sticking to traditional value. Mm-hmm. And here's a guy who literally was brought up in, like a polygamist, like Mormon. And I got no problem. Mormon, you can do whatever you want. Your life is your life. But it was just interesting that they were gonna, were gonna let these kind of things happen.
I think Utah and some of the Mormon communities have very, very deep political ties. They have communities that are very political. And so they're it makes sense. And they also have a lot of hands in business. So yes, it would be non-traditional, but a lot of that non-traditional Mormon, practice is, kind of just, not talked about. Yeah. So we'll put it that way.
I get you.
But even with Mitt Romney, you're looking at him, this guy made universal healthcare in Massachusetts. And then denied it when it became Obamacare. It's like, what are exactly the Affordable Care Act? And you're like, what is the logic here? But he was technically a moderate. You're pairing with somebody who's this more fringe candidate. So it's, and then they just totally went off the deep end. And you got Trump, who I guess his vice president's supposed to be the moderate. You've got Pence, who's moderate, who scares the hell out of me.
It's one of those things that I think I stick to this reasoning is that I think Trump was a necessary. I don't know if everything he did, but I think Trump was a necessary aspect to kind of shine a light on everything that's going on, because I don't think a lot of people in this, I'm going to say majority of the following in the States don't really know that much about politics. And I'm going to say that's a whole North American thing, because even in Canada, we're aware of certain things, but there's a lot as far as how politics work. Who we should be voting for is not known. But I think Trump, in being in power and showing, just kind of, it showed the fragility of the whole system.
Absolutely.
Two, I think it gave a necessary view into what it's like to deal with someone who has a dictatorship mentality, where they know it's best. They're not going to take anybody else into consideration.
And just not abide by laws or abide by, loyalty. No. You just kick everybody out. It's the closest thing we've had to fascism, I really believe.
That's it. So I think it was really, I think, although it's been very hard, and especially, of people who he didn't view as his voter group, his followers, it's been very hard. But I think it's a necessary thing to say, listen, man, but this is the importance of putting somebody in power. This is the importance of not just, and I have a because I went to school in Tennessee, so I've got a number of Republican conservative friends who look at Trump in more of, they're like, he said there was this, he said there was that. He's like, yeah. And to a certain extent, there were certain things. And I think, like I said, I think Trump was a shining light, to a lot of stuff that happened and that was happening, that a lot of people didn't pay attention to. And I think him being in the position he was in and not being a politician, but getting to the highest office in the United States, I think it showed that you guys don't take your own system seriously.
No, Yeah, yes and no. I've had this argument a lot with, my Thanksgiving table, as we'll call it. I come home and it's a collective, like, different amounts of, or different types of people with different types of politics.
Right.
When it comes to America, there's very little taught about American civics. There's very little taught about, basic human life in America anyway. Like, how do you file your income tax? Just
Right.
it's not. It depends on what school you are. It's a huge systemic issue. Okay, so schools are funded by tax base. So if your school is in a lower tax base town, then you are going to have probably a less good education than somebody who comes from a wealthy town, because obviously they have. I went to a school system, we weren't taught civics. And I've made this joke before, but it was the truth. My textbooks were from 1967 and said that we were winning the Vietnam War. Let's put it this way. Okay, so Americans do have to put in a lot of extra effort, but I think that over the years it's been purposefully constructed that people are not engaged in their civics. And it starts at home. You don't have enough time to go to your local, town hall meetings or your school board meetings or whatever it is, and people just are completely disengaged that they have a voice, and that's where it starts.
You guys didn't even get time off to vote.
What's that? Yeah, we don't get time off to vote.
You didn't have to vote. Like, that was crazy. When I was talking to a couple of buddies, I was like, "So you guys are gonna go vote?" He's like, "I can't vote." He's like, "I got to work a 12-hour shift. I don't have time." I'm like, "But isn't it legal? Like legally, the companies have to provide you with time to go vote?" Like, no. Like,
and talk about gerrymandering. So now you don't have access to public transport, and they put the polling station across the town. So now you have to take time off, and then you have to take out 2 extra hours to travel to do it. Like, it's purposefully designed like that, and it has been for years. Both sides have been accused of gerrymandering, but let's face it, Republican gerrymandering has really moved polling stations out of inner cities, away from places where there's access to it. They've put it, during COVID, a lot of polling stations used to be at nursing homes because there was space. So those got down and moved around. And whether or not it's purposeful or not, I think it is. It restricts people's ability to participate, so they don't participate. There's a lot of people who were scared that they didn't have the right ID, and in the States, not everybody by extension or immediately has like a state voter ID, right? You have to go and get that. You don't have a driver's license, so people don't have this sort of stuff. They may not have access to their birth certificate or whatever the case may be, and so they didn't go to vote. A lot of people on the opposite side of the side here would say, like, "Oh yeah, they voted illegally." They didn't. They can't. They're just people don't have the basic necessary documents or proof of identity to go vote, so they don't. There was a lot that goes into that. So back to it. I mean, they just don't have civic engagement. And they don't realize that you can go to your state capital and you can go yell at your state Congress people for not representing you properly. You can call your senators, you can call your House of Representatives if they move on bills that are against the policies and ideas that you believe, and people just don't know that. I picked up the phone and I hate to admit this, but I harassed the hell out of Mitch McConnell. I called his office about several times a day, left several messages, just because I felt like I had to, my senator, but his policies were atrocious. So you can go and do that, and you have to hold your leaders accountable. So there is a disengagement from that, on top of people who are working 12-hour shifts. They don't have time to do this. They've got kids, they have mortgages, the market's not great, everything, COVID, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, and I think I don't think a lot of Canadians actually understand that that's how it is, because I think in Canada, we have a very, I don't want to call ourselves privileged, but we're definitely, because of this semi-socialist system that we live in, it's kind of given away, it's given an opportunity to kind of secure a lot of the democratic things that we have in place, because we pay our taxes. And I'm also a firm believer that the one thing I know, like people in the States, especially my friends, when I talk about like taxes and stuff and everything, they're like, "I'm not paying taxes." I'm like, "Yeah, but you paying taxes is you paying your share into the country that you live in, And I understand for you guys, it's different, because in the past, anytime America was taking taxes, it was so that they were funding the government. It wasn't that they were funding systems that were helping you. It's that they were just funding the government in itself.
And to get their systems were like pulling teeth. So when they did happen, everybody fought back on them. And it's like, but we could have nice roads. We could have nice schools. Like, you know, and we could share that equally across places so people had an equal advantage going into life, you know? Yeah. So you can have, you know, decent school system. You could have school lunches for kids who can't afford it. You could have these things, and that's what your taxes should be going to, not to lining, you know, politicians' pockets or, you know, Lockheed Martin, you know, for instance.
Yeah, so, well, that's a whole other thing in itself with the whole, you know, military industrial complex and the ideal of, you know, that's where the money is being invested, because that's where, you know, America makes the majority of its funds to keep itself rolling. But yeah, it's I always, every time I get in this debate with people, the same thing. It's I try to tell them that, you know, it's a different mentality. It's, you know, America really, to some extent, is survival of the fittest. Absolutely. And it's very much you can do it, like, you know, they say it's the American dream, you know, anything is possible, and to an extent that is true. Everything is possible. The problem is that you're going to have to fund it, find it, fix it, fill it, you know, filter it, everything.
It's possible I could win the mega millions, but is it likely?
There's a lot of things that are in place. The problem is that everybody can fund it, fill it, do everything, which means that people can put things in place that block you, not knowing that it's blocking you. That's the disconnection, you know, amongst the different classes, the different races, and everything like that. And I just find, like, in Canada, it's a completely different, it's a different concept. It's like, well, we're gonna do some things together. Like, we're gonna have some basics that we all keep, you know, fundamentally running with each other. But then, you know, we'll have a market that you can do what you want, and you know, you can run your businesses. You're going to be taxed. Yes, you're going to if you make money, you're going to get taxed a lot. That's it. But in the end, it's like,
that's how it functions. That's how like, America wouldn't have children hungry in classrooms if Apple paid their tax and didn't, you know, offshore their accounts.
Well, yeah.
It's as simple as that. They have something like, what is it? It's nearly $1 trillion worth of tax. $1 trillion could, you know, help with the student loan situation. It could help, you know, but it goes back to exactly what you say. It's that mentality that this isn't earned. That's my money. It's earned. It's not earned. It's exploited, for one. Jeff Bezos is pure exploitation. Like, let's talk about that. Like, if healthcare, or if Amazon workers can't afford healthcare and he's opening up homeless shelters for the Amazon employees, then there's a problem. I don't understand how that is not, like, straight up exploitation.
Yeah, it's a weird, I don't know, because at the same time, you know, like, I feel like Bezos, like, I'm not going to take anything away from Bezos, because he came up with a concept, an idea that a lot of people never even thought about. You know what I mean? Like, he created a system and figured out, you know, well, I'm going to do things better than the post office. I'm going to do things better than anybody else on the internet. I'm going to create, you know, an analytics infrastructure, and an analytics powerhouse that will rival, that nobody will be able to, like, nobody can do anything now on the internet without AWS. Like, he can literally shut down Amazon. He can shut down all that stuff and literally run the business off of AWS, and he'd still be making billions and billions and billions of dollars. But yeah, I do agree to a certain extent that, like, I always look at it in terms of, it's like having kids with no parents. Mm-hmm. It's like, for those who believe in, like, you know, a free market, or I have a buddy who's a libertarian, which I agree with some of their ideas. Some of their ideas do make sense, but for me, it's always like, they still have this, like, ideal that the market will balance itself. I'm like, but the market is made of people, and there are good people, and there are bad people, and there are people who manipulate the situation, and there are people who will do things. You know what I mean? So, like, for you to have this ideal that the market in itself will minimize everything else, it's like, okay, maybe eventually, but so you're going to live 50 years with an unbalanced market where people aren't going to be able to make money because somebody decided to do something that it's just like, it's a thing. Like, there always needs to be some kind of check and balances that, you know, balances the world out.
Society. Like, we talk about society and how a government doesn't work, and it would be the same thing with a market, free market, right? So we still need a check and balance. We still need to have a discussion. There still needs to be agreements and terms and a conversation between people. Otherwise, it is open for exploitation, which is exactly what I believe is happening. And whether or not we call that Congress of people a government, if you want to go to the libertarian thing, or just like, or an economy, for instance, it's just, you have to have that conversation. Like, there has to be a conversation, and there has to be set rules and bounds. In my opinion, I think at the end of the day, people are by nature. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. That'd be too much. I don't think people by nature are anything. I think that people, especially today, have a propensity to be a little bit more, less humanitarian. Let's put it that way.
I think the ideal has moved from being about helping the fellow man and more about keeping the system moving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's been less about trying to keep people alive, worrying about your quality of life, and turned more into what is the maximum amount of output that you could possibly ascertain in a lifetime.
And then I have to ask a question for what is the motivation? Is that legacy? Is it self-preservation? Like, I don't to me, it's a foreign concept. Like, I just don't understand that mentality to output, to keep the system going, to what means for who.
Well, it's the weird thing of like exponential, the theory of exponential growth. Like, like the market and things want things to grow exponentially, but I'm like, there's nothing in the universe that's exponential. Like, there's nothing in the universe that continuously does something in the same, on the same, and does not taper off, like life, death, like life.
Exactly.
Death.
It's not going to make you live longer. Your life doesn't, age exponentially, right?
So it's weird that the market is built on this ideal that a company has to keep earning more and more and more and more and more. It's like, so a company can't just ride the line and be like, we made 5 billion this year, we're gonna make 5 billion next year, and we'll make 5 billion the next year, and then we'll make 5 more billion the next year. It's like, cool, all right. But then
that sounds like a great life to me, if your employees are taken care of.
Then the problem is you taper in inflation and balance and all this stuff and different markets. And like, to a certain extent, I understand like you're trying, but that's the problem. I think what happened was life has become a competition. I mean, life has always been a competition, but it's in a competition in a different format, where we were striving before to, get food on the table, hunt, live, find shelter, all this kind of stuff. Now we've created a new thing where it's like, well, I'm going to gain power through monetary means more than you will, faster than you will. And I'm going to control and take care of more than you can, because that's my ability, and I'm going to find a way to do it. So
by any means, it's not even by merit. I think that's what bothers me the most.
I think some do merit, but I think a lot of people, I think the problem is that people stopped looking at the way that they were doing it. Exactly. And now it's like, they're like, I'll just do it. I don't care if people have to go, shit end up or whatever. Like, I look at California and the way that California is being done right now. Like the governor of California has literally sold out his entire state to stay in power. Like he kind of gave so far into the social justice thing that he like bypassed the idea of, trying to make sure that the state was safe for a lot of people. Like, you look right now in LA, a place where I used to live, the homeless populations, I think, increased 20 times in the last 4 years. Yeah, and they had cases of like, they've had cases of like diseases and sicknesses that they have not had since like the 20s. Yeah. Because they put in this they facilitated this ideal of that, well, they have rights too, and they're doing this, and it's like, yes, but at the same time, a lot of these people are mentally ill. Like, they're not getting the help they need. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you're leaving them to their own devices, without a state of mind where they actually understand what's going on. You know what I mean? Like,
but that goes back to social services. Where are the social services? There is I don't know a single state other than, I think Colorado in Denver did divert funds from the police departments to have a social service emergency responder unit, which I think is phenomenal. but that's taxpayer. So people are coming out of the woodwork, and a lot of people are saying, I don't have to take responsibility for his life. So if he doesn't want to take his vaccines and he doesn't want to, take his medication, then so be it. But we have that also opposite line of saying, like, okay, but we don't want to become institutionalized. We don't want to be institutionalizing people again in the same way that it was. People do have rights, but there has to be a social structure that can take people and actually, help them through. And it starts, again, it's systemic. It starts early childhood. Like what kind of homes are they in? Did they have mental issues at that early age? Should they have been medicated? Should they have been therapy? But none of that exists. Therapy is exorbitantly expensive. So, huge, big systemic issues in the United States when it comes to that. And affording.
It's one of those situations where I don't even know the standpoint. I've gone down so many rabbit holes trying to figure out, how do we deal with this? How would they deal with that? How do you, change this positioning? How do you deal? And it's just every single time you
go down a rabbit hole of how you can or can't. It's massive.
Yeah, it becomes this whole idea of like, I don't really know how to balance this out. And I think that's just the weird thing about America is 50 combined states doing their own thing, trying to come to a like summarization of, okay, well, this is how we run it. This is America. It's like, well, and I mean, as someone who lived there for a short amount of time, but like, had lived in different places, like, I've been to New York, I've been to Florida, I've lived in
They're all vastly different.
Lived in California, lived in Tennessee, been to New Orleans, been to Chicago, gone to like all these different areas. And, a lot of people want to be like, well, it's America. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the same.
It
like
is not
people, and it's like, I don't think people really understand, especially in Canada, because I think Canada, we have something, I think it's like we have 34 or 36 million people here.
Yeah.
And in the States, it's like 330 million people. It's like, like you try to get 330 million people on the same page. Like it's next to impossible. And I was listening to this one. I was listening to Sam Harris a little while ago, and he was talking about how he was giving the idea of that, like, in some cases, maybe the United States should actually just work like the EU, like as opposed to trying to be one country. They should just be 50 or 15 or 10 or whatever different
areas.
Countries working under a premise, because they're like, one of the problems he's like one of the problems that they have is that they're trying to get everybody on the same page when everybody's on the same page. And they're like, it would almost be better to take people and be like, over here, it's like this. Over here, it's like that. Over here, it's like this. So it's like you have the mindsets of people in different areas who will do different things, and you can go to the area to where it better benefits you, as opposed to trying to get all these people fighting, and they can come together under like, the Americas, if they want to, whatever, they can come together and then decide like the EU does on certain aspects and guidelines. But it's almost like trying to have this total control of these 330 million people who all have different ideologies, different lives, different everything.
This has been talked about a lot in the States. So we're talking about breaking down states. I mean, we used to have, the colonies, and then you had the, North and South, and all these different pockets of places in the United States. It has been talked about. I think it's the only problem with that is that you then would end up in echo chambers unless you had like a way of people coming together and actually, like if you have somebody from the deep South who is a white Klansman, and those Klansmen and people who are driven towards white supremacy go to that place, you are backing up, that ideology. I mean, I would hope that it would break down into different areas, maybe more than it would be by ideologies. But like that has been the fear. Is that,
and I understand that fear, but I'm the kind of person where it's like, I believe love and hate are always going to be two things that are going to exist constantly. Yeah. The world is about balance. Like the war, of what we perceive to be good and evil is going to be a war that that forever goes on, because that is the definition of what it is to be human, is to be aware of,
There will always be a scapegoat. There will always be a person to hate. There will always be a person
to love. And I think the thing is that as someone who went to school in the county that was next to Weakley County, which is the headquarters of the Ku Klux Klan, and seeing trucks drive by with the wizard tag and the whole thing on the side of it and everything, and then being on a team of predominantly black kids and then going to Memphis, which is predominantly black, and then going to Nashville, which is mixed, but then the middle of the state is completely white. This is something, at least for me, that kind of naturally takes place whether we believe that we're listen, I think again, even like you look at something like the internet, where it's like, I had Sterling Downey on my last podcast, and he was talking about how he wishes that someone would just blow up the internet, to a certain extent. Like he wants an internet blackout because he's afraid of what it's going to do to youth, as far as like bullying and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with him, but at the same time, a lot of this internet is what's brought a lot of change. For me, it's not about I don't blame things. I look at people. You know what I mean?
Who's taking responsibility for himself?
That's it. Nuclear power created the nuclear power plant, which gives us power. It also created the A-bomb. You know what I mean? So it's really in the hands of who's using the tool. But just as far as like for America and dealing with those kind of things, it's like, for me, it's like you would hope that progress is always being made. You would hope you hope that people are always going in a direction where they're trying to better their lives and they're trying to drop stigmas that hold them back. At the same time, as I've said to my girlfriend many times, I believe that there are people who are just going to be left behind. I believe there are people there are people who are physically dominating. There are people who are mentally dominating. There will just be people who want to stick in their small hole, whether it be racism or simplistic lifestyle or whatever it is, and they don't want to change. Yeah. And I don't necessarily believe that, because I think a lot of the problem, and this is one of the deals that you have with the interstates and the coastal states, is that the coastal states seem to believe that they're more intelligent or higher whatever than the interstates. It's like, well, no, you guys have a different lifestyle. You're living in your 3.5, 4.5 apartment, getting up, going to Starbucks, getting your macchiatos and whatever, and, talking on your cell phone, going into your office, doing your creative work on your computer, and then worried about where your sand cassette is, right? These people are waking up at the ass crack at dawn. And because I went to school in an area that was an agricultural school, you're talking about waking up at an ass crack at dawn, getting shit done, and there's no one to do your work for you. It's not like,
that's your family livelihood too, right? So you are getting up at the crack of dawn and you are feeding the chickens and you're going to go put the hay out and feed the cows and get everything out. And, you got kids who are 15, 16 years old out there who got driver's license or 15, 16, like 14, 15,
because they can drive a tractor. That's it.
Well, that too, but also because you're so far away from your school, from your society, your local town, you're so far away from everything. But
that's it.
That is your reality. No, totally understand that. I don't think it's an intelligence thing. It goes back to what you say. It's a different kind of life. So yes, those two people, it's going to be an impossible conversation to have, to come to an agreement on anything. And it's because you're also witnessing life differently. So if you were in, Bumble Nowhere, Kansas, doing that every morning, what are the chances that you've met somebody who's LGBT or who's a minority or who has, a different religion than you? It's very unlikely. So it comes down to those values. I'm always of that, haughty liberal mindset of saying, I do believe that people should have the experience of living with other people of different than themselves, because that's what makes tolerance. That's what makes intelligence. I think it means that you get more empathy, compassion, intelligence, and just human experience.
Well, it's like these things are just when you don't experience these things firsthand, they're just fantasies.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Then it's easier for you to take that good versus evil standpoint, because in your mind, this is just something that is not necessarily real, that you're fighting to make not real. The ideals of, people living different lifestyles aside from your own, because in your mind, at least being someone like that, is that my life is going okay. Everything is normal. We're fine. Things are predictable. Things are okay. Whatever. We have a bunch of other stuff that we can't predict, but we're trying to control this avenue. right?
It's about
But
control. It's people's,
that
fear and loss of, that
exactly,
control their lives.
that's it. And then when all these other things are introduced, you're like, well, what? No, this is
Yeah,
not right. I'm not having this. This is not going on this way. Like, I mean, even for someone for me who like, I went to school, like, oh, well, listen, you're an American.
yeah,
But like when I was from Canada, I'm going to the States, and I'm talking to a bunch of guys who grew up in rural Tennessee for the most part, or rural Georgia, or whatever, and I'm talking differently. Like I look similar to them, but I'm talking differently. I have a different mentality. Like I'm like my whole the way I carry myself is different. And they're like, Canadian. What is Canadian? Like I don't make sense to them. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
exactly
I
that. I
you
mean,
can
yeah.
you know what I mean?
America
So
is filled with those pockets too. I try to talk to Canadians in particular about that difference between Canada and America. I mean, I grew up in a town that was predominantly African American, one of five white kids, and I have always told people like I never felt othered at
mhm,
once by minorities,
mhm,
and going back to when I went to high school in a predominantly white high school, just because it was Catholic school. There were black people there, even distribution, but it was predominantly a white culture. We'll put it that way, and that was a
right,
culture
yeah,
for me.
yeah.
And I was like, what the hell is this world? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And
Your
we talk
your
about
your your brother is black, right? Your adopted brother.
adopted brother is Haitian, yeah. So he's
Yeah.
from Haiti. So he's black. My best friend growing up, her mother's my godmother. They took it very seriously. I attended Jamaican church every Sunday, so I was
Very
in
nice.
service every Sunday, and then at their house, and it was like the kids were my age of her
Hmm.
family, so they were practically cousins growing up. So that was very comfortable for me. But we talk about that in the States because it's literally you can go 1 mile left. There's one street in Hartford I'll talk about, and on one side, you have the governor's mansion.
Hmm.
So the governor of Connecticut lives there. All of these mansions just stacked up on this hill, and they're like just gorgeous, old Victorian mansions. Literally across the street, across a bridge, it is the absolute worst part of Hartford. The absolute there's not even paved roads through these projects. It's dirt roads through projects. And that's the American mentality. So you're talking about people who live in proximity to each other, who are seeing these things, and you see the inequality and wealth disparity. It's mind-boggling. You can go to a town and you could have people who are absolutely impoverished and people who are absolutely wealthy. You have people of it's segregation without segregation as well. So
Hmm.
again, when you go talking back to that tax base, if you are from a non-wealthy, tax base, you're not going to have that great education. You're also going to have people who are on welfare, who are in the child system. Sorry, I forgot the word there for it, but who are a part of the foster care system,
Hmm.
who don't have access to their families. And then literally maybe 2 miles away, you have people who have everything in the world. So we can talk about rural Kansas, we can talk about, intercoastal, interstate, but it happens even interstate is what I'm saying. It could happen within
Yeah.
cities. It's this
Hmm.
disparity of mentality between people. And I think that has caused a lot of issues in the United States. It's segregation without segregation. Like the first thing I noticed here when I went to university is how multicultural it was. I had never met so many
Yeah.
people from different parts of the world in my life.
Yeah.
People say that even that's just the university mentality, but even my friends who were going to school in like Boston, it's still,
It's completely different. It's completely
it,
different.
it, yeah, it's completely different. It was predominantly white girls who dressed the same, looked the same, came from the same backgrounds. That sort of mentality. I was very happy to come to Canada, and I was like, wow, like there's so many different people, there's so many different experiences, and you're all pretty. I went to school in Toronto too,
Yeah.
so you have so many different
Toronto.
communities. Yeah, I know. So, but yeah,
Little America. No.
it was a very there have been a lot of things I've talked to Americans and Canadians about the difference between the two places here.
Hmm.
One predominantly, let's talk about healthcare if you want to go back to that. Like I remember getting stitches at the kitchen table because my mom was like, "We're not going to the hospital." Luckily, she's a nurse, so that didn't that didn't hurt so bad. But times like breaking my arm and my mom going, "Don't you dare get into that ambulance." She's like, we can't afford the ambulance. We're
Right.
like, I'm gonna drive you. So you're waiting there with your arm like this, and she's like,
You're
I'm gonna drive you to the hospital. And here, like the first time I had to go to the hospital, I was like, okay, so how much do I owe you? And they're like, it's free. And I was like, what do you mean?
Universal healthcare. Yeah,
Universal
it
healthcare,
works. It works.
It's
I mean,
breaking that down.
I mean, even for me, with me and my girlfriend's our daughter, we had a lot of things where we had to stay in the hospital with her for like 3.5 weeks. And my buddy who lives in Ohio had a similar thing with his son. And I remember I was like, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, if it wasn't for a number of foundations and different things, whatever, he's like, I think our bill was like $275,000, like $275,000. And I'm like, if you contemplate that for a second, just to think that like you were just born and you already amassed debt of like $275,000, which the majority of Americans would not earn in 20 years, something like that.
If they're lucky. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Lucky.
Like even the whole student debt thing, like it's one thing, you know, a lot of people had a problem with a lot of things that Bernie Sanders said, as far as him trying to bring in a socialist system. And I understand to a certain extent a lot of things. I still kind of backed Bernie after I watched his I think it was like hour or 2 hour long thing with Killer Mike. And even on his thing on Rogan, he was the only politician I know who would do that. He's literally the only politician who was willing to go and have elongated conversations with nobody else there, just him.
He's been having these conversations since 1970, like the 60s, 50s, probably.
Exactly. And I understand
that so much.
Yeah, and I understand a lot of people don't agree with a lot of his policies. But for me, and it's much like what I was talking to Sterling in the last podcast, I appreciate someone who is willing to sit down and talk as a human being, not as a politician, not give me sound bites, not whatever. I had a buddy who was talking to me.
I'm not trying to buy your vote. I'm trying to buy your mindset.
Well, right? I'm trying to tell you where my mindset is. I'm not trying to say things that are, I'm not trying to say things that will get you to vote for me. I'm trying to align.
Student council. They're like, I'll put in a soda fountain. No, that's not what we need. What we need.
I'll lengthen lunchtime by 20 minutes. It's like,
or just conversations. Maybe if you are unhappy with what's going on, I'm going to be the student president so that you can come and talk to me.
Yeah.
Open up that dialogue. That's what I loved about Bernie. And I don't think that his policies are too out there. I think that America, it doesn't abide by capitalism, let's put it that way, or free market. It doesn't abide by that. It would require social, agreement. And people aren't ready for that. But I like that.
It's very, again, it's the monetization of the political system. And I think one thing, I was talking to Jen, my girlfriend, a while ago, and I said, I was like, I had this epiphany. I'm like, do you know what America's number one export is? And she's like, military. I'm like, it's people.
Yep.
I'm like, this is why America, does this whole thing about immigration and stuff. But I'm like, if America didn't have 230 million people or 330 million people, if they were a country of 100 million people, what would they do?
Yeah.
I'm like, because what America has is buying power, right? Mm-hmm. They have an open market that allows people to take out insane loans that they can't pay back. They sell that debt off to other people so that they can, gain interest on those debts. Like America, to a certain extent, sells its people. Like it sells that's it's like, hey, you want to make some money? Okay, come in here, and these people will buy all this stuff and do all this stuff and amass millions and billions and trillions of dollars of debt. And
on the internet too. A lot of these are American companies. What do they sell? They sell people's information.
Oh yeah.
So it's the same. It's the same capital at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre, like, and again, like I like America. I like, you know what I mean. I got people there who I love, and I love the concept and the idea of America. You know what I mean. I like the idea that in certain sense that
Great in theory. Like, I mean, I don't like to. You get indoctrinated, okay? As a small child, you know, am I going to run around with an American flag and think that freedom is amazing? Yes, of course I am. There's fireworks, there's jets, you know, like it's very easy to understand that when you're
guns and jets and eagles. We're America.
You know, it's exciting and it's easy to sink your teeth into because it was marketed. Yeah, this is weird to say. America has been marketed to its people as that. And that has been.
I'm hushing my dog because he's sitting there nipping at his ball sack, whatever. Non-balls, as we say. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. America's been marketed as that amazing free awesomeness, right? And when you're growing up there, you believe it, especially if you're privileged. And I was privileged, right? I didn't suffer too much. Middle class family, and you know, had everything that I needed. I had clothes on my back.
Again, you know what the saddest one of the things for me though is that it should not be seen as negative as people who love America.
No, it shouldn't be.
You know what I mean? And that's what it's become. It's like
it's become synonymous now with you know
what I mean?
Climbing up the walls of the Capitol building, smashing shit out. Yeah,
that's it. Again, I went to school in Tennessee. There were a lot of people who you consider to be patriotic. There are a lot of people who put the flag up. You know what I mean? And are proud of you know being American and what they believe. And I'm like, but these are the people whom should be the ones at the forefront. It should not be the right-wing extremists. It should not be the people. And on the same side, on the left, we shouldn't be, because in the end, are you fighting to tear down your country? Like, and then what goes in its place? You need the people who are proud and love America.
I think we all should be, but we also need to be, in my opinion, I think that we just need to be proud, more proud of something that we built and finished. We haven't finished, you know, the civil rights movement. That was evident. Right. We didn't finish that. We didn't film
it'll never be finished. I think the problem is that you have people whom are so defensive, especially now with America and being, you know, because let's face it, around the world, whether you believe it or not, America is shat upon. Jokes are made up, whatever. And in turn, a large part of it is America's fault because America sells itself. Like American TV is the most watched TV on the planet. It's the most publicized, you know, everything. Like everybody knows, you know, everything about America because America puts it out there. Yeah. But at the same, it's like Andrew Schultz said. He's like, listen, and he was making a joke kind of thing, but he's like, listen, it's like making fun of black people, kind of a certain sense. It's like if I'm black, I can make fun of black people, whatever, blah. I can make jokes and shit. He's like, if we're American, we can make fun of ourselves. We can poke fun at ourselves. We can do this kind of shit. He's like, if you're not an American and you're sitting there and you're calling us idiots and calling us stupid and all this kind of stuff, it kind of plays along the same guidelines. It's like, we're living here, we're going through it, we're making fun of ourselves, we're doing it. He's like, understand that if you're doing it and you're from somewhere else and you're doing whatever, well, then that's not going to be seen as in the same light. And that's not us being overprotective. That's us being human.
It also comes, it's like the kettle calling the pot black, right? So when you have like someplace like the UK, for instance, if you're making fun of me from the UK, you can go F yourself, because the truth of the matter is you have your colonialist policies, you have Brexit, you have everything else going on, and you're no different and struggling in the same issues that America is struggling with, you know, different issues, but the same side of the coin. It does hurt a little bit, but, you know, we have been made fun of since for God knows how long. Let's talk about after Reagan. Maybe towards the Clinton era is kind of when it started to really pick up. And then you have George Bush, who, how could you not make fun of that? And that's when things started to become strategery. But it was hilarious. But this is kind of where the world shifted. You talk about how much 9/11 shifted the rest of the world, and America, how much changed at the time. I think that Americans had prestige in the world before that. I mean, and I hate to say it, it was self-inflicted. They had their hands everywhere. You had the hands in Cuba and South America and, you know, the Middle East, doing nefarious things. But they still had prestige across a lot of the world, right? And so American tourists weren't as, you know, picked upon. And then you had 9/11 happen, and we had so many bad decisions being made post 9/11 in the way that we were seen in the world. And you saw just that patriotism that you're talking about. It is when it got uncomfortable for me as an American. It was the people who were sitting there going, we want to kill Muslims. We enlisted to go kill, people in the Middle East. There was like that sort of thing. I saw a rise in, and maybe in the Gulf War as well. Let's talk about that. So during that time, that patriotism, like I could see you can love your country, but to enlist to go kill Muslims because two buildings in an intercoastal city, or in a city on the coast, which is far, far away from you, I think that there is a huge discrepancy there. Yes, America was attacked, but your motivation, your patriotism that came from that, and the decisions that were made post 9/11 to, the Afghan War and the, Gulf War Part 2 and, the Iraq, Afghanistan. I think that was what really made us shameful in the eyes of the rest of the world. And I get that. George Bush was the shameful stain on our history of what happened after that. A whole lot of nothing happened, except, the lives of millions of Middle Eastern people were affected. That racism and xenophobia spiked in the United States. And those are the things I don't want to be proud of. I want to be proud of, like my grandfather was a vet, and, my dad was an all-American guy. He was always interested in local politics and doing those sort of things. And that to me is American patriotism, being involved in your local systems because you love America, because you want to see it great. So I guess those are my two discrepancies on it. So I got very uncomfortable after 9/11. With that kind of patriotism, it became really hard, especially here in Canada at that time too, to say like, yeah, I love America. I find it really hard to say,
Because my dad's American.
Yeah.
I have a sister who's American. I got tons of friends who are American, family members and stuff. And so I mean, like I'm semi close to it. You know what I mean? Like even part of me still, because my father's American, a part of me still holds, America in a special place because it's a land that has a part of my heritage connected to it. You know what I mean?
It's where I grew up. I can't change that either. You can't change that, right? And I'm still tell people I'm American.
That's it, so it's like, I'm Canadian, I'm a Quebecer, but then I've got a whole set of like, slew that goes south of the border. So, again, it's one thing like Jen was talking to me about, and she's like, you're really like involved in American politics. I'm like, but I'm connected to it.
Exactly.
I'm like a large part of me is connected to anything that goes on down there. I'm like, if war breaks out in America,
do we think that there's a bubble over Canada?
Like, well, one, do you think there's a bubble over Canada? That's the first part. And then secondly, it's like a lot of people who I care about live over there.
Exactly.
Like, a lot of my family is there. You know what I mean? Like, and it's scary to think that the world, like being, like you said, so close and being
yet so far.
It's that close away, but yet it's so volatile.
I can tell you right now, this has probably been one of the most heartbreaking years in my life for me. As you were saying, you call your family to be like, hey, are you okay? Are you okay? That we have to do that this year. And it started with the BLM movement. All right. So I'm calling my friends and being like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? My friends, my friends who are minorities in states. And I never, ever wanted to be in a position where I never wanted them to be in a position where I'd have to ask that, but you're checking in on people. Are you okay at that protest? Are you okay there? Are you home? Are you safe? Then you got COVID going on, and my parents are in their 70s. My mother will kill me for saying that. She's not in her 70s. She's in her 70s.
She's a 50-year-old woman looking good.
She's a lovely 29. So like, they're vulnerable. So you're calling them and being like, are you okay? I haven't seen my family in a year, probably a little bit longer for my sisters. And that sucks. it sucks so hard. And I just, it's COVID, it's the border restriction travels, but it's also like, them watching this all unfold. I don't think I've ever talked to them so often in my life either. I think we were chatting every day. And my mom, I love it. I call her the rage mom right now because she has been going on these power walks, and she's so enraged by what's happening in the injustice of the United States that she sits there and she rage types while walking about, yelling at people in New York Times comments. I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world. She's getting a lot more socially active and getting out there for justice. She's gone to protests for BLM. She's been out there for the women's movements. And I love to see that. I'm very proud of that. But it also makes my heart hurt and scared for her too, with COVID, with everything else that's going on down there. And for all of my friends down there. So I feel like, yes, we are very close, but even with the travel restrictions, we're so far. And that's been a weird change. This is the first year that's happened for me. But it is close, we are so close to America. It takes me like 4.5 hours to get to Connecticut from here. In fact, so we can cross the border within an hour and a half. We could be in Burlington, you can
be in Plattsburgh in like 45 minutes, like just
exactly.
Shop and come right back. Yeah, for sure. It's I used to have a girlfriend who lived in Maine. It was like, it's not that far. It's really not.
It's really not that far. We're in Maine,
huh?
Whereabouts?
Portland.
Okay, Portland. It's a pretty cool city.
It actually is a pretty cool spot. Like, there's a lot of Canadians there, surprisingly. You know what I mean?
Well, the big joke is Old Orchard Beach in Maine is Little Quebec. They have a dépanneur now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Well, that's her father owned a spot there. Like, he had a little beachside souvenir shop that we used to go like help him out at every once in a while. But yeah, it was it's
you
crazy.
Really have been in all four corners of the United States, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I'm telling you,
like everywhere.
I tell you, I've been to the south, I've been west, I've been east, I've been southeast. Like, I've seen all different aspects of America. Like, and that's why it's like, being in the position I am, it's like I don't even think that, and being around people who a lot of people would consider to be, who look like me, would be considered to be the enemy. And sitting down and having candid conversations, and just not understanding that there's a difference in culture. Like, there's a thing that is distinctive to the Western world, is none of us are from here. Like, none of us grew up here. None of us are native to this area. And in not being native, like you would say, like in the East, where like, even UK, Italy, you're talking about this is where people sprouted from. This is where people grew from, like Israel, Palestine, like that's their area of origin, like literally where they trace themselves back to. In not having that kind of lineage and being in North America, I think we have a huge problem in understanding that there are differences in culture for people. And especially in the States, I think that is what the States suffers from the most, is the inability to acknowledge different people's culture within their own country. That someone who lives in Tennessee has a different culture than someone who lives in New York, who has a different culture than someone who lives in Chicago, who is different from someone who lives in Oregon, who lives in LA. Like, the amount of people who live in the States create like these sub communities that are completely, like, even when I was living in LA, we often took a trip to San Diego because a couple of guys came from San Diego, and you're talking about two towns that are pretty much the same thing, the same distance, like almost from like Montreal and Quebec City, maybe even a little bit closer. It's completely different. Like, Absolutely. LA is go, go, go. Let's fucking go. Like, we got to make money. We got to make cash. I mean, I remember the first time I talked to a girl there, she asked me what my job was and how much I make. That was the first question she asked me. And I was like,
funny because that's the first thing somebody asked me the last time I went to Toronto. And that was the last time I went to Toronto. But
that's their culture. That's how they are. And that's why I knew LA wasn't for me, because that's not how I live. That's not how I thrive. You know what I mean? I had one girl come up to me once and tell me, you'd be my boyfriend if it wasn't the fact that you were Canadian, you couldn't work. I was like,
Okay.
Okay. I'm like,
But even that, so I'm an East Coaster, right? And I get accused that I talk way too fast, especially if I'm back home. Like I talk way too fast. So I was working in LA for a bit, and I had people who were like, yo, like the California mentality. Like even though that they're going hard for money, they're like, you're really like uptight, man. You're going too fast. And I was like, we have something to finish. That's why. Let's get it done. You know, so like we're talking about completely. Even like we're supposed to be on the same mentality. Yes, we're trying to make money and get something done, but at the same rate, it's a East Coast, West Coast vibe, you know. But
in sociology, they equate that to, or psychology, they equate that to the amount of people in a certain area. That there's a theory that the closer people live together, the faster they speak. Because they have to get more in a short amount of time because they're so close to each other that they get away out of each other's way. So it's like you need to be like boom, go like next thing.
New York City, you know, what is it? It's 14 square miles and 8 million people, probably even more than that right now. So you're gonna be talking
which is good because when you live in Montreal and you go to New York, you feel like it's a second home.
Oh,
like it just feels like a bigger Montreal. Like I don't know, there's some weird thing between the two cities that just meld. I think
that's why I came to Montreal. When I came to Montreal, it was like for Canada, like if I'm gonna stay in Canada, this is the closest I'm gonna get to home, and it feels nice.
I think it's also because New York has that melding, like that melding of cultures. Like you will walk down a street in New York and you'll have like a bodega, you'll have a Chinese restaurant, you'll have an Arab restaurant, you know what I mean? And like there's not that same level of it's like they say, it's like when you're a New Yorker, you're a New Yorker. That's it. Like you're nothing else. You're just a New Yorker. Like that's all you are. And I find in Canada, or at least in Montreal specifically, and I think this is the big problem between like Montreal and the rest of Quebec, is that in Montreal, like when people are here, we're very much about celebrating other people's differences, like as far as cultures. Like we want to go eat at the really good Cambodian restaurant. We want to go see the Japanimation that some guy from Tokyo made when he was here. You know, we want to do these, like the people from Africa who are coming in and doing like speeches and stuff. We want to see all these things. We want to gauge. And I think the biggest problem that we also have in Quebec is that you have this center, this mass of people who are trying to diverse. They're seeking diversification amongst themselves, and the rest of the province wants to be like, you need to slow the fuck down, because if we let you guys take over the whole province, we're going to lose Quebec we're going to
lose French. We're going to lose Christianity. Hence, like, can't take down that cross in the National Assembly, but like, come on, it's time. And that's it. You could get it's exactly like the United States. You talk about the Kansas versus New York, for instance. Like you can go 2 hours out of here, less. You can go 45 minutes out of here, and people live on farms.
You can go 25 minutes in one direction, and you're going to hit something completely different. You just got to go to a ski hill, and your life, everything changes completely.
Exactly.
But it's just like with the States, it's just, again, I think it's just so polarizing because so much of the United States is in front of our face. I mean, if any other country was like that, where they would put so much of their dirty laundry out there because they were willing to sell whatever it was to make that, to make the coin, I think we'd all have the same like position. Like for me, it's this weird divergence where we will look at different countries, like we'll look at China and we'll look at these other big countries that we consider to be overpopulated, and be like, oh, look at the way they do things, whatever. And it's like, well,
we did that too.
Some things are similar. I mean, we're not making people disappear necessarily, like, and we're not, the state's not saying like, well, you're dead, because you said this and this. But I mean,
Yeah, close enough. I mean, we have a lot. America has got its blood on its hands, but even let's take it something to less innocuous. Let's talk about after World War II. Americans coming out to the world who finally had money thanks to the military-industrial complex, who were finally going out to the world. So their husbands had fought in Normandy, so now all of a sudden they're like, let's go on vacation to Paris. I'll bring my wife this time. They're going there, and the French are making fun of them because they don't know the words, and so they were kind of like, getting they're just learning how to walk in the world, right? But they were slowly setting up international and diplomatic prestige. I was just thinking about this recently because somebody was there was a lot in the news when Chinese people who are coming into the middle class have been traveling a lot more, that there had been etiquette lessons by the Chinese government for people who were traveling abroad because there were some, things that they didn't know, whatever the case may be. And this was in the States, in the same inception of the United States as well. You're going out into the world for the first time because you have money for the first time. You don't know all the rules. Which salad fork do you use, right? Whose rules are these anyway? But America has had its up and down on this, but we've always been nefarious. There have been nefarious things out there, so we are not different from places with where there are atrocities happening, right? So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's
no, it does, yeah.
And then China even coming up for the middle class for the first time. It's like
that's one of the things, and it's I always compare Quebec and Texas. Because I feel like it's like Quebec is the Texas of of Canada, where we have a separate government. We have a separate government. We're always trying to secede. We believe that we do things better than everybody else. We have we have a pretty diverse area that is capable of doing a lot of different things. And we walk to the beat of our own drum, but in terms of doing things like that, we're very much like we get sucked into this ideal of a lot of people listen to only one source of information. And Texas has changed a lot over the last, I'd say probably like 10 to 15 years, where, before, when they were kicking everybody out and say, like, you need to get the hell out of Texas because only Texans people get to stay here. They've more
wildly diverse now. I've heard a lot of coming out of Texas.
It's like, Austin and all these things. And now it's like, if you come and live in Texas, you're a Texan. But just understand that we do things differently. We're going to welcome you with open arms, but understand this is the culture. This is how we do things. You want to be a part of it? If you don't, doors that way. That's it. And I've got no problem with that. For me, it's like, and for me, I think that is the biggest problem in Quebec, is that we have allowed politics to separate the idea of keeping Quebec culture alive. Because I'm Anglophone. I'm born Anglo, went to English school, all this kind of stuff. Like, I can speak French, but like, I only speak English because that's how I can express myself better. But I will fight tooth and nail to keep Quebec. I will fight tooth and nail to keep the Balconvilles and the Dépanneurs and the French folk festivals and all those things. I don't speak the language greatly, but I don't want Quebec to ever lose that part of itself, because I think that's what keeps it the way it is. You know what I mean?
And how could not being bilingual not be beneficial? Like, it's
of course.
It's beneficial to everybody. Like, I have worked really, 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 really hard to learn French. I'm not good with languages, but I have done my best, and I can get by here, have conversation, and that's important to me. And I think that makes me it enriches my life. I will do everything to protect Quebec language as well. However, I think that. I would do anything to protect Quebec language and Quebec, traditions here. I came here knowing that I had to learn the language. I came here knowing that I had to learn the culture. That just so happened the culture suited me as well. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my St. Cassettes. I enjoy, working, working to live rather than living to work.
Exactly. And I don't want Quebec to become Toronto. Again, I don't really have anything against Toronto. It's just the ongoing joke that, Toronto is Toronto and Montreal is Montreal. We don't like each other. That's the whole joke. But but that's it. But like, I enjoy the European ideology that Quebec holds. I enjoy the fact that we believe in a certain level of living a life that is that is worth living, not working. You know what I mean?
Up until recently, we had pretty reasonable rent prices.
Mhm.
Job market, there is an increase in salary happening now, which I think is pretty good. I guess it goes with cost of living now. I think it's a beautiful place to live, and I like that. And I like that, like you said with Texas, if you go there and you do the
you can buy
culture,
so much land in Texas, it's ridiculous.
But if you abide by the cultural norms, then it's great.
Yeah.
The only things I don't like about Quebec were, the xenophobia and racism that came with certain political issues, as you said.
Yeah.
That I didn't get behind. But when I look at Montreal, I'm like, hell yes, this is a city. I can speak Franglais at people, and that's the greatest thing. I could be in the middle of the conversation. I could switch to French to English, and I love that. I think that's phenomenal. How could that not be a benefit to people?
That's it. Yeah. And that's what saddens me about the whole political avenue. And I think it's the same thing that happens in the States, is that you have people who truly love the place they live. And I think for the most part, that's what a lot of people who consider themselves to be native Quebecers are, right? They want their way of life. They want to ascertain their way of life. And I feel like what's happened is Quebec politics, Quebec media has turned it into that English people want to take that away from them. I'm like, it's quite the opposite. I actually want to protect that. I actually want to keep that. I actually want to be, someone, but at the same time, I want them to realize that just because, you know what I mean? Like if someone's coming here, a lot like Texas, if someone's coming here, it's because they want to take part in this. They want to be a part of it. They want to protect it just as much as you, and they want to acknowledge, you know what I mean? They want to keep that alive. They want to keep that going. And for me, I always bring it back to this one thing I remember reading when I was at university, where the largest number of high school dropouts in Quebec are Francophone.
Yep.
And I'm like, but everything is built towards you. Like French universities get tons of money from the Quebec government. English universities do not. Like when I was playing football, UDM just started their football program, I think 2 years before I came back to Canada. They got $10 million in endowment to start their football program. $10 million. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then I remember when I was talking to a couple of my coaches or our ADs and stuff at Concordia, I was like, so does the government give us any money? We're like, no. I was like, well, why? Because we're English. What does that got to do with anything?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, French kids don't come to Concordia? They
do. They do.
4 out of the 5 of athletic trainers that I have here are French. I'm like, so they don't get, because they left that system, they don't get to. They're just like, I don't know. I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense, man. And now it's like English, like now, because Jen's obsessed with obviously COVID, and she reads every friggin' scientific article, political article, news article. Like the girl just, there's nothing she doesn't know. There's nothing she doesn't. There's nothing she doesn't know about COVID. But she's always telling me that it's ridiculous because the Quebec government is refusing to put these HEPA filters or whatever in the French schools, like or any school. Like they don't want to do it. But the English schools, so the English School Board, the Lester B. Pearson, the Montreal English School Board, have taken upon themselves to take out of their own budget to put these filters in. And I'm like, and I was saying today, I'm like, this is gonna lead to a lawsuit against the Quebec government, because they're forcing all these immigrants and stuff to come here and learn French. And I think they should learn French. Don't get me wrong. I think it's very important that people come in, learn the language, learn the heritage of where they live, so that they could be part of the culture. Very important. But at the same time, it's like you've got to do your part on your end to facilitate people of being safe, of making sure that they can succeed in the outside world, because that's what's really going to drive people to. There's a reason that everybody loves New York. Like New York is such a staple. There's a reason LA is such a staple. There's a reason that because people who come there are coming there to either achieve something, or people who are from there go other places and achieve something grandiose. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you treat your people as your ambassadors to the rest of the world and stop trying to keep them confined within this small area and being like, well, you can only, you need to stay here because you only speak French and French should only be spoken here. So we're keeping the bubble. It's like, fuck the bubble, dude. Like, let's get these kids like the best fucking education they can possibly get. Let's get them speaking 2-3 languages. Let's have everybody like be like, oh, you're from Quebec? Shit, you must be fucking smart because those guys are fucking monsters. Like, you know what I mean?
And we've had issues here. I'll never forget it. I read a book that somebody gave me, and I told somebody, I was like, I'm going to try to read this book, like eventually, like when I was taking my courses, and they were like, this is the kind of French that I can't even read. And I looked at her, I was like, you're an intelligent person. How would you not know how to read this? And she's like, oh, it's in that very like, grandiose. It's like too difficult to kind of read enjoyably or to write. And I was like, how do you not speak your language? Like, and I know how horrible that sounds. But she's like, there wasn't an emphasis on that sort of higher level reading and writing. It was always spoken. And I was like, like,
and that's one of the biggest controversies is because they're always talking about, securing the French language, making sure that you're using French, all this kind of stuff. But it's like, I remember distinctly in high school, or like, it was high school. I wrote a paper because you had to start. That's when you started writing papers. I wrote papers, and I must have spent so long on this thing. Like, because my mother's actually French. She's from Manitoba, Saint Sulpice, but she was born French. Like, her first language was French. She's more English now, but like, she was born French. So, but she's not Quebec French. She's France French. Like, my family, like her family originates from France, so they speak French, Parisian French. So, and we lost her for a second. Okay, well, there she is.
Hey man, sorry about that. It was melting the plastic that it was sitting on. I just needed to move it, and it decided to shut off in there.
The cat's just like, yeah, you've done enough. I get it.
So yeah, she's from. I didn't know. She's from France.
So like my parent, my mom's family is like originates from like France and the Ukraine. So coming here, like the only French, like the French I heard growing up was from my mother. But then, so when I would come into school and stuff and they would speak, I wouldn't understand a word because I didn't understand. And so like, I remember I was writing and I spent so long on this thing, man. And French is so hard for me. And I spent so long on getting the grammar right, everything I was using sources in French, like Becherels, and trying to get everything correct. And I spent so long on this thing. And the teacher, all she wrote was, "This isn't real French." I was like,
I could put it in.
I'm like, but this, I'm like, I didn't use the simplest of words. I went in a frigging French dictionary and learned the appropriate word for this exact situation, which took me like 45 minutes to find out how to say this. And you're going to tell me that this is like, she's like, this is all unnecessary. This is I don't know what this
flowery. Yeah.
I was like, and that was also,
commend you for taking an effort,
I'm like, I'm never gonna understand French. Like, that's just it. I'm never gonna get this French. I'm just never gonna get it. And I mean, like, even to this day, I still see like a very simplistic French. I don't get slang. Like, I still have so much trouble with the slang. Jen always has to be like, they were saying that. I was like, oh, okay, I gotcha. I understand what that means. Like,
it's funny because I've taken it from a reverse approach with my ex-partner who was Quebecois, and we were talking, like, I'd go to parties with her and her friend, and I'd be like, I have no idea what they're saying. And so I got really into learning the slang because I wanted to understand what it was like to be a Montrealer growing up here, especially a Franco-Montrealer, because it was not something I grew up. I didn't grow up consuming Canadian culture, first of all. So Mr. Dressup, still trying to understand that. Mr. Rogers all the way. But like, I didn't grow up consuming.
That's blasphemy here. That's blasphemy.
Words were spoken. There was, I didn't grow up consuming Quebecois culture either, and so I wanted to understand it from that perspective as well. So she'd sit and show me like kids' TV shows that kids our age would have watched. Just so you start to get that cultural collateral and like understanding what the slang or what the the culture came from. And I like to always approach culture that way. So I love watching kids TV shows from around the world to just be like, what the hell is going on? Like, what are your early educational references? What are you? It's fascinating. So I'm getting better at the slang. And it makes me laugh every time, especially when you try to translate it and break it down and see where it's coming from and why it means that exactly. Like,
it's unique and it's great. Listen, it's the same thing as like any kind of slang that you learn you learn anywhere in English.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I have no issue with it. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I'm fine with it. It's cool, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just like, for me, it's like it's a talking point more than it is actually something that they are really trying to preserve and have their people excel. Because for me, it's like, if you guys are ranking low in education and employment rates, then why are you doing all of this? Because these should be the people whom are getting the majority of the jobs. These are the people who should have the higher grades in school. These should be the people like who are receiving mostly in endowments and endeavors. And it's like, that just doesn't seem to be the case. So there's obviously something that's happening it's not benefiting them.
I mean, I'm always shocked. I'll put it this way. There's two ways. I'm always shocked when I meet somebody from Quebec who doesn't speak an Anglophone who doesn't speak French. I'm like, how you lived here? Like, I feel like that's dishonorable, and I feel like you had it. I know that there's blood there. I know that it's there, but on the same flip of the coin, I'm always shocked when I meet a French person here who can't speak any English, like even a little bit.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. For a long time, I did not speak French. Yeah. And like, I did not speak French well. I got better
around the States.
Well, yeah, but I got around. That's it. Like, I was in CEGEP, it was getting better. It was more normalized. Then I went to the States for a couple of years and lost pretty much all of it. Yeah. Came back again.
It, that makes sense.
Well, that's it. But came back again and then had even more trouble trying to, whatever. And then I'm out of school too. But I actually found, like, when I got out of school is when I actually started picking up French a lot easier. And I started understanding French a lot more because it was a lot more. And for some reason, once I got out of school, reading French was a breeze. Like,
I don't know what that is. Reading French is actually much easier than trying to understand. I can read the news all day long.
While I was in school, but it's like once I started having to like read news in French and read the journal and all this kind of, I was like, oh, I totally understand what's going on now. I'm like, why couldn't I do this before? I don't understand. I don't understand why I couldn't divulge the two. But yeah, it's just I don't know.
Even knowing a little bit on either end, but I've met people now, and they've lived in Montreal their whole lives who are francophone, who don't say anything beyond hello or goodbye in English. And I'm like, I mean, that's fascinating. You are that that Black person that, like, actually is the preservation completely of not having any English exposure. And it's more of a marvel for me. I have nothing to say about it, what it means or anything like that. I'm just like, really? Like, nothing.
Yeah, it's crazy. The craziest thing that I found is I went to the World Juniors for football, where we played a states team in New Orleans. And New Orleans actually has French immersion schools.
Yes.
And they actually learn a lot about Quebec in New Orleans. And I was like, we were all like, wait a minute. You guys learn about Quebec? Like, you guys know about us and you know French? Like, we were talking back and forth. I was like, why aren't they telling us this? Why isn't Quebec like jumping for joy and trying to make like as many like connections to like the state of Louisiana as possible? Like, they want to speak French. They want to be part of the French culture. Like, they literally have Mardi Gras. Like, why isn't this like
I never understood that. It is the truth, because people say, like, in Louisiana, like, they're like, yeah, we know Quebec. We know, like, it's exactly what you're saying. It's just, it's wild. Like, Quebec, come on, you got people here.
I'm like, they want to be our people. Yeah. I'm like, this could literally be the Black Quebec. Like, this, like, everyone, you know what I mean? You don't like the shit here, you can go live in Louisiana. It's the same shit. It's the exact same shit. I'm like, I don't understand.
Even in Maine. Maine, there's now places in Florida that are like colonies of Quebecers now.
Oh yeah,
I know.
nobody's migrated. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
they've migrated, but even in Maine, there are places you can go and people will not speak English to you. They will speak French, and it's just like you should be capitalizing on that. These are tourist destinations
Like
for fun.
these are your pods.
Yeah,
This is what I was talking about, right? Like
yeah.
you should take your people as ambassadors of your province, and as they circumvent and as people take notice of your province and the things you do, like you should be all about that. You should be all about being like, here, look, this is like, this is our influence. Like they want it, like New Orleans loves us. Maine's got a spot. Florida, there's a ton of us down there. Like that should be our legacy for this thing. Like that's how you spread culture, not
Plus, I
by
would
trying
love. I'm sorry, I had to cut you out.
Oh, yeah.
I would love like a discounted flight to New Orleans from Trudeau Airport over here. Like I would be down behind that. The food, just New Orleans. Come on,
so good. It's so good.
It goes exactly.
I've still never had crawfish or jambalaya. I can still remember what that tastes like. I can still remember when the mother of the foster or whatever the family that was sponsoring us came in with a huge pot and just dumped it on the table and was just like, okay, well, this is how we eat crawfish, and this is jambalaya, and I was just like, this is so good. I'm like,
nothing better,
oh
nothing better in the world, especially crawfish bake, man. I miss that.
Crawfish is so good. I hate lobster. Can't do it.
Yeah.
But I love crawfish. I can do crawfish all day.
Yeah, it's that and then have you ever had Maryland blue crab, soft shell crab?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Crab is actually pretty good. I don't know what it is about lobster. To me, lobster doesn't taste like anything.
It doesn't really have, you're tasting the butter, right? That's what people are going for.
Like you take the butter and the garlic, but literally it's just like, I guess if you have to survive off of it, it's fine. But to me, it's just like you're eating tofu. Like that's it. There's no taste to it. It's everything that goes with it. That's the whole thing. So
yeah,
I don't know. But listen, man, I want to thank you so much for taking time out, talking about this thing and talking about everything that's going on. I'll definitely have you back on, as these things progress and as we keep talking about, all the stuff, and hopefully they stop storming the Capitol. Hopefully,
Before we sign up, the one thing I do want to say about it, and this is the one thing I'd like to see in the United States right now, is I do hope that the Senate doesn't enact the 25th Amendment. If not, I do hope that Congress will impeach him again. I think that display of whatever the hell happened, he needs to be charged with treason. And
from everything that I've read, what he did was illegal.
It's sedition. It was an attempted coup d'etat, and it's treason.
It was a revolt. He literally tried to incite a revolt. And not only did he incite a revolt, but because of his position, he actually prevented anybody from stopping what was going on. Like, if people are like, oh, this is racism, and they're letting people, it's like, no. This is the man who's at the top of the food chain telling you that you can't defend yourself. Like, that's them telling them, like, he tried to incite a revolt with the most far right aggressive people in his fellowship to scare people into not moving on to Joe Biden. Like,
that is straight up sedition. It's a felony, Class C felony in the United States, and it holds, I think, a penalty, if I'm not mistaken, of 20 to 25 years for treason and sedition.
Between you and me, I think they're going to off him before that, anyways.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, listen, I hope nobody, whatever, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, government's off people all the time. That's just, part of Secret Service and covert operations. If Donald Trump all of a sudden drops dead in the next couple months, I'm not going to be surprised.
I'm also not going to care. I'm sorry. I know I value human life, but at this point, that's what I got to say on it. But anyway.
Again, man, I think Donald Trump is a mentally not well individual, especially after hearing about all the drugs and stuff that he administers to himself through, like, his doctor talking about all the stuff he takes. I'm like,
was it Vyvanse or
he literally never sleeps. Like, he sleeps 4 hours a night. I mean, no wonder he's sadistically almost insane. Like, you can't. like anybody would be that. That's absolutely asinine what's going on with them. But anyways, that is it. Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you for having me, Blake.
Again. Thanks so much for listening, guys. This has been Uncommon Sense Podcast. Have a good